You know where you are. We are officially recording. All right. Lovely to see all of you again on and off camera. I can see people in the chat too. Before we kick off today, I'm going to pass the mic over to Leah MacMillian, who's our investor here, who is joining us today. I also had the privilege of meeting Leah today. So please, Leah, introduce yourself to the group.
Hi, everyone. My name is Leah, and this is my second year with Sheboot as an investor. And I'm really excited to join the workshop today, not just as an investor, because I'm, obviously have vested interest in how this goes, but I'm also a former chief marketing officer, chief storyteller for a big software company. In fact, the last 10 years of my career were at a cybersecurity software company, and I basically developed our stories for customers, for partners, for analysts, for employees, and financial analysts. Now, we were a big public company, so it's, a little bit different, in some ways more regimented in terms of how you craft your pitch for financial investors. But I think a lot of the principles are the same. And, learning what investors care about, that doesn't change. And sort of some of the things that I learned, I didn't often have to give those pitches. I was creating them for my CEO. So I worked closely with her, female CEO. I worked closely with her to develop those pitches, and she would give those to the financial investors. And our company was actually Japanese headquartered. So I had some extra learnings to do in terms of having a lot of Japanese investors, in addition to some of the big US ones that you'd be familiar with. So anyways, I'm just here to offer some of my experience as we go through the workshop today. And I can add comments and just kind of relate some of my stories as they are appropriate. So nice to meet you all.
Thank you so much, Leah. Yeah, really excited to have you here, Leah. And as you're mentioning, talking about different ways to approach different kinds of investors, I think that probably resonates with a lot of different people here, not just investors, but different people that you're pitching to. So of course, we're focused here today and through a lot of the Sheboot program on pitching to that particular investor cohort, and then switching mindset to pitching at SAS North and to other potential funding audiences, but you all have many people that you're pitching all the time. So I'm sure Leah will be an incredible resource for that today, and hopefully in the future as well, I'm sure. Amazing. Thank you so much. So what are we doing here today? I'm going to share my screen first and foremost. It is a bit of a different format from last week. I know you've already gone through our session together, which was long and amazing, and I really appreciated it. And then you had your financial literacy session, which I'm sure was incredible, and had your pitch practice already, or your peer-to-peer pitch practice, I know as well. And Katie also did share with me the survey that was sent to you and that you answered. So thank you everyone for answering that. That gives us a lot of insight in how to best kind of build these sessions for you. So what I've done is here, I'll share my screen. And slideshow. Oh, Slack's putting you in weird places for me now. There you are. Can everyone see everything? Yes, thank you. I'll pull up the chat so I can see that too. So like last time, I will try to keep my eye on the chat. I'll try to keep my eye on your hands up the best of my ability. And if I miss someone, Katie can also feel free to tell me there's some burning question going on. But what we're doing today is we're going to start with a case study. So this is with a founder, the founder and CEO of VodaSafe. Her name's Carlin Lankarek, and she was the winner of the 2023 forum, or the audience vote at the forum, because they awarded all of the finalists with funding that year, or have started doing that. And then there was an audience vote as well for another 20,000. But why I thought she was interesting is because of what we talked about last week, as well as what I saw in your survey results, which was, I saw that there is a real mix of experience levels in this group in terms of pitching, but the average kind of weighted response was around being like having a moderate level of pitching experience, having pitched a few times, and having pitched to a range of different kinds of audiences. Although like the majority it looked like was kind of in that either one-on-one with investors and mentors or in the conference kind of or event kind of space. And then it looked like there was kind of a predominant confidence around delivery, unless there had been a recent shift around business changes, or it had been a while since you pitched, or you really felt like something's missing in your pitch. It's not landing quite how I want it to, or polish is needed. Those were kind of some comments that we were seeing that were common. But it looked like there was slightly more doubt in the actual pitch deck itself, which is a part of narrative pitching and feeling confident in the things we talked about last week, the mindset structure, as well as the narrative pitch that we'll talk about today. There's also obviously aesthetics and design element, which there will be a session on that coming up in a couple of weeks, I believe. And that's a really great one. I understand was part of the cohort last year and everyone really loved that session. So really excited about that for you as well. And it looked like 46% of you all agreed on the area you need the most improvement on being content and structure, with honestly most of the answers were around traction and financials or numbers and how to tell that story. So Leah, fantastic that you have so much experience in storytelling around numbers and talking to financial investors and how to build that into your pitch. I think that's really, really useful. And so what I wanted to do was, after we talked about the case study, which, oh right, I was mid-sentence when I switched into talking about the survey results. So the reason I chose Carlin as the founder to focus on for this case study is that when she came to me, she had been pitching for a long time. She was actually quite comfortable with pitching, but not with her pitch that she was using at the time. So she was kind of that prime example of the Frankenstein pitch that we talked about last week. She was feeling really uncomfortable with it. I'll show you her pitch when she came to me, so the semi-finalist pitch from the forum a little bit later on, and you'll kind of see how it feels a bit disjointed and that she was not feeling very authentic in that pitch and was kind of saying some of the same things I was seeing in your survey results. So that's why I chose her. So she's pitched before, for sure. She's not new to pitching, but to the point of many people's comments from the survey, which was like, I've pitched, but it always can use improvement, pieces like that. Hopefully you'll see or her experience you'll be able to relate to, kind of regardless of where you're at in your own pitch journey. And then building the narrative pitch. We're going to talk about different elements of story within a pitch. And I think about building the narrative pitch as that defense against the Frankenstein pitch. Like at first I was thinking I'll have a whole section just on how to avoid the Frankenstein pitch like we talked about last week. But really, if you're building a narrative pitch, that is the opposite of a Frankenstein pitch. So if you're going through those actions, you're not going to have one at the end of the day. So that's kind of how I'm framing that for myself. And then bits and bobs is literally just in response to what I saw in your survey responses, which is around the financials and the traction and all those pieces that are kind of still the content we talked about a little bit last week, but a little bit more on how to tie it into story or how to bring it into your story. So we can decide together what we want to do, but my idea is to go through the case study, talk about and introduce you to different exercises to build out your narrative pitch. But instead of going through all those exercises with you here today, we will take a good chunk of today to hand the mic to you and say, what are your challenges? So let's talk about finances and numbers for sure. Get Leah's perspective on that. What are you struggling with in that section? What are you struggling with talking about traction? And just kind of see where that takes us. So just in case that's concerning, because you really want to do the exercises, I wanted to tell you that you will have the as resources, you will have the deck that I have here today, and I'll include speaking notes for all the sections. That's kind of more knowledge that I usually say out loud and it's not on the screen because I like to have a more visual deck. So you'll have that information, as well as I'll create a document that has all the exercises. It's something you can do with your coach. It's something you can do with me. You can book me one-on-one. It's also something you can do in peer-to-peer groups. And it's really just ways to get you thinking about your narrative pitch and where you are at today versus where you want to be in 5 weeks when you pitch to the investors as part of SheBoot. So that's your resources. And 1 second, let me make sure I'm not missing anything at this point. Great, cool. So does that sound good to everyone? Is there anything that you're like, there's something really standing out that I really thought I would get out of today that's not been said yet that maybe I can work in. I want to make sure you have everything you're looking for to the best of our ability. Can I get I can see all of you on camera. Cool. Okay. But as per usual, let us know, get in the chat, put your hands up, emojis, all the things. So as we talked about last week we focused on mindset and structure. Today we are talking about narrative. So how to connect to your audience and create a clear thread within your pitch. And what I would like to get into now is that case study. So let me see. So as I mentioned to you, Carlin Lunkarek, I worked with her in 2023, and she is an incredible founder and CEO. If you haven't heard of VodaSafe, if you haven't heard of Carlin, highly recommend looking into what they're doing. Oops. Oh, my screen went away. Hold on. My screen went away from me, I should say. Where is my screen? I clicked on something. You know what? I'm going to stop share and reshare because that's not happened to me before and I don't know how to deal with that. Okay, let me share. There. Is that showing like normal again for everyone? Okay, great. Incredible founder. So VodaSafe, at VodaSafe, they've developed a handheld sonar device with which they do underwater search and rescue. Really impactful company, really incredible. And when I worked with her, she had already raised 2 million from investors over the years. She, as I mentioned, loved pitching, felt confident, but over the years she had experienced pushback from investors. I think I mentioned this last week, where she was told when you're talking about why you're building your company, when you're doing your pitch, it feels a bit too touchy-feely, and she really struggled with tailoring the pitch to her audience. She also said, and I quote, "The feedback I often get is your market's too small, you're not big enough, are you sure this isn't this type of business?" And she said, "Oh, you're not getting the vision at all, which must mean that I'm not doing a good enough of showcasing the business case." So she completely shifted her pitch tactics and focused on the business. She focused on solution, strategy, financials, traction, and plan. All of the buckets that we talked about before, or boxes, or however you want to think about it. Structure. She really focused on structure and kind of let the narrative side of it slide. So by the time I worked with her, Carlin said that while she still felt comfortable pitching, like to what many of you said in your results, delivering the pitch I feel comfortable with, but I don't like my pitch. It doesn't feel good. So she said to me, "In focusing on the business case, I think I lost the feel-good part of why this all started and why everyone in this office cares about what we're doing. Our mission is first and foremost. I would feel more true to myself if we were talking about why we are doing what we are doing." So her dream was that an investor would hear her pitch and think to themselves, "I'm aligned with that vision. I will wait for the business details. I'm curious about their mission." I'm sure this is the kind of investor that all of you are looking for as well. And it was a really important moment for her to kind of like take back the pitch, if that makes sense. Like she was no longer necessarily pitching to what she thought her audience wanted to hear. She had gotten to know her audiences really well. She knew what she needed to say in order to tick the boxes, but realized like at the end of the day, it needs to be someone that even if I don't tick the boxes, they still will want to talk to me. So it's more about engaging that intrigue and trust that we talked about last week as well. So let's look at what her pitch looked like when I first started to work with her. Okay, so I'm going to share it directly from this YouTube. And okay, I'm gonna share sound. Let me know once I've started it. Let me know if you can. I can't see your faces, so I'm gonna hope that you can hear it. Say out loud if you can't in a second.
Button there to unmute. Thank you. Thank you. All right, we are going to be moving into our second location. And from Vancouver, BC, we have Carlin of VodaSafe.
Hi, I'm Carlin, founder and CEO of VodaSafe, where our mission is to save lives through safer, faster water rescue. Drowning is called the silent epidemic by the WHO, and over 250,000 people die by drowning each year. That's more than half that of malaria, but drowning doesn't receive the attention it deserves, and drowning rates are on the rise. Each rescue or recovery incident costs in the order of $40,000. It's incredibly dangerous and resource-intensive work. The US spends over $250 million on coastal drownings alone each year. Our solution is AquaEye, a handheld sonar device that allows you to scan the area of a football field in 2 minutes and pinpoint the location of a victim. It costs less than one incident and has recovered victims in 5 minutes. Our app will allow us to capture global drowning data from which to educate communities not only on the cost of rescue, but on the cost of loss and provide a solution. We currently have a recurring revenue plan that allows our customers to service their units on an annual basis, but the app will allow them access to further features such as data management and allow our team to capture data on product use. Looking at our market, we have 3 customer segments. We started by selling to individual organizations, early adopters who were eager to bring new technologies into their rescue protocols. Once we had captured enough testimonials and use case data, we expanded into key accounts, statewide organizations who are hugely influential in the adoption of rescue protocols, including disaster response. Traction at the state level will give us access to the public safety market, where AquaEye can become to rescue what the AED has become to CPR. We're currently selling into 11 countries, 40 states, and 8 provinces, and have targeted 5 new markets for this year. Our customers are talking. 25% of our closed business now comes through referrals, and that percentage is increasing. When it comes to repeats, we have customers who have budgeted for 1 AquaEye every year over the next 3 years, and those who've been able to equip every vehicle in their fleet with AquaEye right away. Deal size continues to increase. Our team of 11 is small but swift. My background in lifeguarding and microelectronics brought the product to life with a strong focus on customer experience. Having worked with Patrick, I knew his engineering background would carry the product through the growth stages of manufacturing. Eric joined in 2021, and his focus on customer compassion has not wavered. He's led sales teams from 0 to 10 million in run rate, and his experience has been pivotal to VodaSafe's success. We broke even last year and are now fundraising to land and expand our market more quickly, reach profitability in 2024, and an EBITDA of over 6 million in 2025. We're raising 2 million to help increase our manufacturing capacity and buy parts in larger volumes to push our margins further. We also need to complete the development of our app and accessories and ensure our story is being told around the world. Help us save lives through safer, faster water rescue because tragedy is avoidable. Thank you.
Okay, so my question is, what are your immediate thoughts? So I know you have the context that she wasn't super happy with this pitch, but this is a pitch that was at the semifinals of the forum. She was very well respected CEO. It was considered a pretty good pitch. Like she was raising money on this. So I would love to get your perspective. Does this pitch feel relatable to you? Do you see anything that you're experiencing reflected in that? And so have a bit of a think on that. First, though, I am going to ask Leo, if you had seen this, what would your thoughts have been?
Well, I thought it was, it was nice and crisp and had the key components, but I felt what was missing near the beginning was kind of the market opportunity was so big and so kind of like quickly hit without a real understanding of what the current challenges are. Like, what are the options right now in the market that, are actually out there and what's missing? Because the biggest thing I think you want to get across is that market opportunity, the what that trend is that is you are most uniquely able to capture, with your technology, with your team, with your ability. So I kind of missed the jump between the market opportunity and then wham, here's our solution. It just kind of missed here's like narrowing it down just a little bit before we jump into, and we've got the solution. I also didn't get a sense of, I could go on, but that was the first thing, the first impression. I think there was something around the uniqueness of the solution that was missing there too. But the very first hook kind of lost me right at the beginning with understanding why things aren't addressed today.
Yeah, absolutely. Did anyone else feel this or would add to that? Put yourself in invest in those investor shoes. Jane, yes. Hi.
Yeah, hi Melanie. I would add that To me, she had a great opportunity on the slide that had the 4 squares. When she talked about customers and clients, like, give us an example. Like, so, you know, she talked about her, you know, she's got revenue, but so XYZ state or whatever brought this in and their drownings went down from, you know, 50 people to 2 or whatever, like just like some kind of a tangible evidence of what the benefits are that some of the customers have received.
Yeah, absolutely. Quantifying all the things. Yes.
Mhm.
And any of the founders in the room, what were your thoughts about this? Good or bad, either way. Or reflections. Jane.
Yeah, I was the unique opportunity was kind of missing for me as well, but her delivery, I wasn't getting, I'm really passionate about this, even though it's clearly a big topic. It wasn't really coming across. I wasn't really feeling that she believed in what she was saying. It was quite a flat presentation. Yeah.
Yeah. Lynn.
I think it was mentioned indirectly, but one of the first thing that I noticed is I didn't feel like, why should I care personally about what you're presenting? I'm not involved in, you know, the solution or whatsoever, but why should I care? I didn't feel, you know, the first like minutes, 30 seconds, usually it's where you need to grab that attention or you're going to lose it. So this is what I noticed.
Yeah, absolutely. Now I'd love to know in the chat or visually with your hands or whatever you want to do. So we're talking a lot about her first 30 seconds and how it didn't grab us. I'd love to know your confidence level in your first 30 seconds. How are you feeling about your hook? This can be a temperature range. This can be a comment in the chat. This can be this.
I would say, I'll just chime in, but break the silence. But I was going to say, I would probably say that the beginning of mine is probably my more comfort than the ending of mine.
Yeah, makes sense. Yeah, I think I saw that reflected in the survey response as well. So I'm glad to hear. I think a lot of people didn't answer this question, which means that maybe they're not feeling confident enough to say I'm feeling confident, which is fine too. Yeah, still trying to find the suck them in kind of hook. So this was an interesting one for me, and I want to take note because we've talked about like why are they unique? There wasn't anything quantified around the fact, like how they're actually creating, what does the impact of this company actually look like? And there was no passion really there. There was a lack of understanding of why this, why you, why now, a lack of understanding of their customers, their clients, and how they stand out in their market. And all these things she had really great answers for, I will say. So last week, we also talked about the difference between what investors might say in a room like this, like Carlin's not in the room, right? So we were all like, yeah, that kind of lie flat. And like, are you even passionate about this? Like the way we're talking about is probably not how we would ask a question of her. So I will lean on Leah and Jane, if you'd like to as well. And how would you have framed a question that reflected your comments that you just made, just out of curiosity?
Well, I think to your point about why now, I think there was something missing for me that, you know, I would say why, you know, this has obviously been an issue for many years. What is it about this point in time that makes this a compelling offer? And what do you think you bring to the table that is uniquely able to solve this problem the best?
Yeah.
So just reiterating what, you know, we're there to hear about, right? We're there to hear about what is the opportunity and why are you the ones that are going to do this for us, and then show us your metrics that say you're on the right track. So I would kind of get her to back up a little bit and just kind of re-express what she probably knows, but just what's that compelling point in time? Why now? And why you?
I found it astounding that there are 250,000 drownings every year. Like, I was like, whoa. I mean, I don't know what I would have guessed if you'd asked me. I have no idea. I think she could have done more with that. Now, she compared it with malaria, and I'm not sure why malaria, because I think what she's saying is that there's a lot more attention paid to malaria. I'm sure there's a lot of researchers and whatnot who would argue with that. So I don't know if there's a better analogy, but to compare it with. But when I thought 250 million, like
Yeah.
I don't know. I think there's got to be something more you can do with that to make sure that sinks in and the size of the problem.
Yeah. When the first conversation I had with her, she said, yeah, who in 2022, I think, who called drowning the silent epidemic. So it's an absolutely massive problem that is completely underrated. And all of the current tools out there are archaic. So there's nothing out there. To Leah, your question on like, what are the other competitions? So this is an interesting one because we talked about last week. What if you're like, I don't have any competition? So she doesn't, in this first pitch, she doesn't even talk about her competition. And then you can hear the questions Leah and Jane are bringing up. You don't really want those to be the questions during Q&A, to be like, can we back up and can you explain why this, why now? Like that should have been addressed in the pitch so you can be asking more interesting questions. So that's why you really want to ensure that we're hitting those kind of like, yes, the structure elements, but to Carlin's point, you can leave out pieces because if you have the why this, why now, with some of the metrics there, if they buy into that, they'll ask interesting questions. And if it's still a fit for them in their investor thesis or someone they know that might be a good connection, then they'll invite you to have that continued conversation, right? So I think it's an interesting one to be thinking about, making sure that we're hitting in our pitch, and like when we're thinking about what to leave out and what to include as well, to make sure that we're thinking about what kind of questions do we want to be getting, and it's probably not, can you back up and just explain this really important part for me to even move forward to understand what it is that you're doing. So when I saw this pitch, I also said, there's good data in here. It's clearly a strong and impactful solution, but it is not a narrative pitch. It feels like a series of facts and figures. This is a classic Frankenstein where it's like, she literally is like, the problem is this, the solution is this, that this is this, that this is this. And it's clearly like she's been getting all of this impact here, there, or all these bits and tips and advice along the way, that she's like put together this very fractured kind of pitch. She doesn't seem engaged and excited. I gave that exact same feedback, which was interesting because then the moment you ask her to talk about her company and her solution in a way that's like, talk to me as if I'm your friend. Like, let's just stop talking about this. Like, let's just stop for the moment. Explain to me why you care about this, as if I'm just your friend or someone you met at a party or something. And when she did that, she completely lit up. She gave me great anecdotes. It was beautiful. I could tell she cared. And I was like, okay, cool. Why is this not coming through in your pitch then? So that's when we dove into narrative. So the other issue that I mentioned to her was the problem framing didn't make it relatable, which comes back to a lot of what Jane and Lee were saying anyways. She talked about silent epidemic, drowning rates, and financial cost. It doesn't make it relatable, especially because it's silent epidemic and none of us know about it. And maybe we know people who have drowned or almost drowned. I know I certainly do, but not everyone does. And so maybe it's not allowing for it to be relatable because there's no story there that is something personal, whether it's about her or her customers. It makes it difficult for us to really understand the lived impact of this. It's just another headline in the newspaper that we all kind of unfortunately gloss over. Also, she does have compelling financials. She talks about her break even, which is great. But because the story is a bit flat, you aren't really paying a lot of attention by that point in the pitch. And she even says, oh, we broke even last year and then blah, blah, blah. And then now we're raising. And it's just like, are you happy you broke even? Like, is this something you want to continue doing? That's what comes to mind for me. So we don't know why she cares about this. That's the biggest thing. So at this point, we were like, okay, we really need to get to work on this. Because she said to me, let me just pick this up. So she said, where's my slides? I really want to get to a point where I care about, where I care again and where that's showing in my pitch. And yes, I want to attract those investors that are going to care about my mission, but even more than that, well, not more than that, but alongside that, I really want to understand, or I really want to feel good about my pitch again. I want to feel excited to pitch again. Okay, where are you? Where are my people? There you are. Every time I open this, it makes all of you disappear again. Okay, there you are. So what did we do? Sorry, and I talked to Carlin about presenting this to you, and she was really happy to do so. Happy to have the script kind of presented to you and all these details. She also invited you to reach out to her at any time. She's now raising 5 million. She's at 4 point something on that raise. And so I'll give you her contact details as well. But just as I'm showing some screenshots of our work together, I wanted to mention that she had said that was okay to do so. So what did we do together to work on this? And this is, from my perspective, how we deal with the Frankenstein pitch, at least for her. So this is a very personal kind of thing. I've kind of created a bit of a process to how I do it, but it is also a very personal process depending on where you're at in your pitch and what challenges you are having. So definitely, again, recommend you talk to your coach, book one-on-ones, continue to do all the practice that you're doing with your peers, and so on. But with her, what worked is that we made use of pitch script. So the document that you're seeing here, the Word document that we had. We also had her pitch deck she was currently working on, as well as a favorite pitch deck from the past. And all of her like appendix slides and what was included in that, because there were a lot of questions I had that I wasn't able to see from her current deck, what was going on. And then we got back to basics. So what we did was we talked about why her and why her team as being a really important piece, why they care about VodaSafe, the impact that they want to make, and what her go-to stories about the companies are. So the things that she loves to share, what lights her up, and what she's proud of. And just had like a half an hour conversation like that, where I was taking note of where was she lighting up, what was really beautiful words that she was saying. Like she said to me at one point, we are, she says it in her second. I'll show you the final pitch in the end. She says something like, we are in the business of creating hope, or something like that. And I was like, that's beautiful. Like, why don't we say that? Because then we're also creating hope for the audience. Like, you're planting that idea that this is hope, not this like dour, I don't know if I want to go on kind of conversation. And it is difficult for you, for those in the audience who are working with a problem, or those in this cohort who are working on a problem that is tragic, that is hard, that has maybe a story that is difficult to share, difficult to tell, difficult for people to hear. Those are hard. That's a hard pitch to do. It's a hard, it's a hard road to figuring out how to shift that story into one of hope, and of we're going to make a difference because, and trust me because. So that was a point for her, is that she was struggling with that piece of it. So we really wanted to dig into what is lighting her up, what is she proud of, what is this? We're in the business of hope. What does that mean? We also practiced reading the script aloud with no deck, which I always encourage people to do. She preferred to like write things out and didn't love saying the pitch out loud when we were doing pitch practice, or when we were having conversations back and forth. So we did asynchronous. We worked on our on the Word document like this, and I just constantly was asking questions and making little suggestions. But otherwise, I was having her do this pitch script out loud to understand where she was stumbling, what words were a bit of a mouthful, what was lying flat again, and kind of continually did that with me having that feedback lens. So when you're working with people and getting feedback from them, even maybe you're doing peer practice, you could one week say, okay, we're going to focus on content. Can you be paying attention to content when I'm pitching, and give feedback on that? Another time you could say, can you be paying attention specifically to my delivery, and be looking for, where am I stumbling? Where is the energy? And kind of highlight that. It can help to tell the people that you're practicing with what to be keeping an eye out for. And then I had her go through and actually highlight the sections that she was stumbling on, to highlight the sections that needed to stay in some formation. So sometimes the words that it was coming out as weren't working for her, but it was like, this is a really key element that has to stay. So how do we make that work? As I'm alluding to, she got feedback from various coaches, including my network. So I sent her pitch out to various people in my network, to various coaches in my network, and investors. She also got feedback from her team. Obviously, they know her, they've heard the pitch many times, they know the product, they know the story. So when she was practicing the story, that was a really great time to go to her team and say, how is this story landing? Do you feel that this really, that this reflects what happened? And because it was very important to her that she be telling truth. She didn't want to be misleading in any way, even though it's a difficult it was a difficult story to share, and it's a difficult conversation to be talking about drowning. She wanted to make sure that it was done in a really true way. We also looked at what is compelling, what is confusing, and how did the pitch make people feel. So that was kind of the feedback she was looking for. Then we talked about applying her investor persona, which I know we talked at length about last week. So she talked about, or we discussed, what does that investor care about, and what questions do they typically ask? And those help. So if she was getting it, so if she said, you know, Leah is my ideal investor, and Leah keeps asking me, like, why you, why this, why now, like, why do you care? And Jane keeps saying, you need to quantify things. And I'm like, well, okay, if those are your ideal investors, I mean, generally you should do those things anyways, but if your ideal investor is asking certain kinds of questions, let's think about, do we include them? How do we include them? Or do we include something that helps you connect with that particular kind of investor and get the kind of questions that you want from them, or just be prepared to answer those questions. So as part of your pitch prep, know that those questions are going to come out from the kind of investor that you want to work with, and be prepared for that. So after all of that, we can now watch the finalist video. Again, it's about a 3-minute video. So take note. It is, unfortunately, it's a live feed, or live, not feed. It was a live event, and it wasn't recorded, so it's on a phone. So it is a little bit hard to hear at the beginning, but I will share it with you, and you'll also have access to it afterwards, so you can always watch it yourselves there as well. Okay. Just...
Hi, I'm Carlin, founder and CEO of VodaSafe. Our mission is to save lives through safer, faster water rescue. Having been a lifeguard for over a decade, I know what it feels like, what a family looks like when they're experiencing a tragedy. No one should have to suffer the loss of such an avoidable tragedy. When it comes to rescue, every second counts. Last year, one of our customers in Texas responded to a missing persons call at a local lake. When they arrived on scene, another rescue team had been conducting a conventional search for 20 minutes to no avail. Our customer immediately deployed our technology and had that missing person on a stretcher in 5 minutes. Tragically, doctors were unable to save this drowning victim, but had that first team had our tech, this life could have been saved. Rescues like this happen all the time. In the US, 10 people drown every day, and they spend over $250 million on coastal rescues alone each year. The threat and the burden to our first responders and our medical system is too great to ignore. VodaSafe is taking action. Introducing AquaEye, our handheld sonar device that uses AI to quickly locate people underwater, turning hours or days of search into minutes at a fraction of the cost of current archaic rescue methods. We launched in 2019 and gained the trust of early adopters across North America, who saw AquaEye as a game changer. We then leveraged those customer stories to capture the attention of key accounts around the globe, such as the US Navy SEALs and Indonesia's military search and rescue. Our customers continue to talk. Thank you. Our customers continue to talk. 40% of our closed business now comes through referrals, a rate which has doubled in the past year. We're currently selling into 8 countries and are in negotiations with many more. Our IP strategy continues to evolve with both pending and approved patents. Our very passionate team of 12 continues to grow. My background in lifeguarding and microelectronics brought the product to life, while Patrick and his background in engineering have carried the product through the growth stages of manufacturing. Eric joined in 2020, and his experience leading sales teams has been pivotal to VodaSafe's success. We broke even last year, and we're now fundraising to land and expand new global markets. We're on track to hit 3.3 million, another year of over 100% growth. Funds raised will be used to improve our manufacturing process, build out our apps so we can provide customers with data management and increase our recurring revenue. And finally, to ensure our story is being told around the globe. At VodaSafe, we're in the business of giving people hope. We know Aqua Eye works. We have proof. What we're asking of you here today is to join us in choosing rescue over recovery. Help us to save lives. Thank you. Hi, I'm Carlin, founder.
It's quite different, right? Same company, 2 months later. Yeah, Leah, go ahead.
I was just gonna say that was night and day. That was so good. I think, you know, one of the things I'd written down is, what do investors care about? First thing they care about is you. You know, who are you as a founder? What is your passion? So I love that she started with her and her passion, and then market opportunity. And she hit those points we talked about, right? What are the challenges today? Why is she uniquely able to do it? And then, oh my gosh, I love the visual on the metrics and the global growth and stuff like that. So much more visual and compelling. Excellent. I loved it.
Yeah, so did I. Chill. So, Katie's saying I got chills. Every time I watch it, I still like want to cry.
She also incorporated a lot more powerful words, you know, like
Mhm.
you know, we use words like pivotal and, you know, introducing the product, like action words, you know, powerful adjectives, which just took it out of that sort of dryness and you know, underscored the importance of what she was saying.
Yeah, exactly. And it was just pieces, it was just things that she was saying in conversation. Like I say, those questions, coming back to those questions of why do you care about this? Why is this important to you? What's a story that you're proud of? What's a story that exemplifies that is maybe a time where this product made the impact that you want to make. And what's interesting is the story she ended up telling, she was like, well, I don't think I should tell that because like the guy, he didn't survive. I was like, but there's that story. And we worked on that story for a long time because she was so like, I have to say that they didn't survive. I have to make sure that that person's family, like that is the truth of that story. And that is the outcome of a majority of drownings. It's usually recovery. It's not what'd she say at the end? It's recovery, not
Rescue over recovery.
Rescue. Thank you.
That
So
was
it's not
one of
usually
those-
rescue, it's recovery. Yeah.
She used that alliteration stuck with me. It's one of the storytelling hooks, right? Is to use that kind of alliteration because I remember it, rescue over recovery. Like it wasn't on the slide, which is the one thing, you know, she's like, help us save lives, but it was such a powerful turn of phrase that I would remember. But this is one of the things I loved about this, and I think it's important for everyone here, is the big difference between pitching to a customer, a potential customer, is you are tapping into their pains. So you're tapping into their pains as potential, you know, rescuers or government agencies or whoever's buying it. When you're pitching to investors, they don't necessarily, they're not buying the product, right? They're not the ones who are feeling the pain of drowning, but they're buying you know, your passion. So the way that she did the story and her relation to the story was very compelling for investors. Because, you know, we're investing in the founder and their passion and then their growth, you know, their potential for capturing the market. So it's a different way of telling the narrative.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And I loved it so much because she spoke to that, who is one of our customers, and then that lent itself into speaking about who are our other customers. Like what does it look like? Who are we working with and what does that look like? And got her to add in the pain point to, like, when she was talking about the pain point, she was saying that there's a huge burden on our lifesaver, like the people who are doing life-saving on rescue teams, financial as well as emotional. Because in a lot of conversations we had, she talked about the burden on the rescue teams, emotional and psychological burden. And she doesn't touch on that at great length in her pitch, but wanted to make sure that was mentioned in some capacity because that's a huge cost to well, it's a cost to those people, of course, but it's in terms of the investor perspective, it's a cost to the government agencies that are hiring those people, and the organizations that are hiring those people have to then account for all of this, the emotional and mental health burden and physical burden, because they're in cold water. And so there was a lot, like when we were unpacking it, there was so much you could say. Obviously, there's a 3-minute pitch. You have a 10 to 15-minute pitch that you're working with, which is different. But this is just to go to show like how you can not say everything that you think is important while still saying a lot to bring up more and more interesting questions that would come up, which I really, which was, yeah, it just makes me very happy to see that progression. She put a lot of work in though. Was there any other, from the cohort, were there any other perspectives or even when you're thinking about your own pitch, like lessons learned or that might be applicable to your experience? I'm gonna wait for a couple of people. I'm sure there's some thoughts. I know this is a very thoughtful cohort. Jane, yes.
Yeah, the whole message was really impactful, but I love the fact that her slides were really simple, but very impactful at the same time. So finding myself listening to her, yes, you see the visual, it's powerful, but it's her story that's really captivating. And I think that's definitely something that I've struggled with. So kind of taking that home and again, just thinking about how can I make it more visual versus, and so the story's impactful. So that was a kind of key takeaway for me.
Yeah, really good example of what we talked about, the principle of show, don't tell that we talked about last week. This was something, again, we worked on for a while, like even that slide that was like the customer quotes coming up, like we iterated on that a few times because it was like not the right pacing, or it was like not quite the right voices coming up, or bolded in the like not compelling sections. At the end, I was like, people aren't actually reading. They might read the like 1 or 2 of them, but the idea is that they're listening to you, and the impact is like, oh, there's lots of people saying great things. That's all you need them to take away. They don't need to be reading the testimonial. It's just like, that's how we start thinking about using the pitch itself to be our supporting actor, is when it is underline in bold the trust me part of it that we talk about. Like, this is, look at all these people. And if you actually look at the quotes, they are from like US Navy SEAL, and they're all like really impactful people. If you were sent the deck, you would see that. But that wasn't the point of that exercise. And so again, can be really difficult when everything feels important. And maybe in past, and Cheryl, I also see your hand, so I'll come to that in just a second. But maybe in past pitch feedback sessions, someone has made that question around, what are your customers saying? Like, I don't really get who your customers are and why they care, and like, is this actually making that big difference? Or like, this is a really it's an archaic tool, which means that the what's currently being used is an archaic tool. So that means that there might be a really big or steep kind of curve to getting them to adopt a new technology. So like, I don't really trust, or there's a red flag for me about this industry in general. Like, if nothing new has come up for 100 years or whatever it is, that can be a really difficult hurdle. So like, you need to show us, you need to like really drive home that people will actually buy this. And so maybe she was like, I need to like put a lot of information on the slide that's like, people care, people are buying. But it's actually more impactful in this case to have that like that punchy. And then in her investor deck, that slide deck that she sends to investors, she can have more information that really that has more detail, right? But Cheryl, yes.
Yeah, one thing that I noticed, and like having gone through our deck so many times and like thinking it's a little bit Frankenstein, but one thing I noticed is that she was really like showing and through her narrative talking about like each of those classic slides that you think you need to have in your pitch, like the problem, the solution, the revenue model, the growth. Like, I liked the way that she was telling that very, very clearly, setting like a very, very clear, like, yes, we have revenue, we have a good, like, strong business model, but it wasn't like, here's a slide with like a competitive matrix, and here's a slide with our like unit economics. It was just very clear, and you could feel it and trust it, but it wasn't just like numbers, which I think is like very different from what we've been trying to do.
Yeah, that's a really interesting point, especially because I saw the results on talking about traction and financials and numbers and how to incorporate that into the pitch being like a high concern point in the group. Again, it was a 3-minute pitch, so she would probably dive into more. Leah, go ahead.
I was just going to add, like, as an example of that, I thought her map chart was brilliant, because without having to say it in all the words of, you know, our strategy is to have this geographical expansion, which she does, you know, talk about. It's so visual, right? She could have had a chart showing the different countries that they were expanding, and she did originally have one with the referrals versus, you know, this was a way more impactful and memorable way of showing that. And so each of the metrics that you choose to include, you know, have to reflect your chosen strategy. And again, it's being picky about which ones are going to best reflect that and do it in a memorable way. To your point, Cheryl, about not having too many of these like boring number charts, because people can only absorb so much.
Yeah. So on that point, though, I would be curious at this point. So one of the questions that wasn't on the survey was around kind of the lengths of pitch that you're most comfortable with. So I am curious, are most of you elongating your pitch or are you shortening it? And again, you can say this in the chat, or you can like go to this for I'm shortening it versus this, I'm making it longer, whatever it has to be. You're making it shorter, longer, shortening, longing, long, shorter, longer. Okay. Combination. And there's different strategies for both those things. Making it shorter. Oh, I'm an editor, so I like making things shorter. So that's easier for me. But you're also going to have support on making it shorter from one of the advisors on my team. She's incredible. Her name is Camille Hunt, and she will help you on actually developing a 3-minute pitch for those who are even looking for shorter. But on the elongating half of things, this is one of my like bits and bobs slides, but I'm happy to jump into it now with this context of Carlin's pitch in our mind. So I would, shorter's harder. Yes, it is, unless you've never made it longer, and then you don't necessarily know where to expand, and everyone just thinks, I need to just put a bunch of financials in there. Or you end up talking about the problem for way too long and all of your fancy bells and whistles on your solution. And so we talked a bit about last time the problem of talking about the problem so much. But yes, I would love to talk a little bit about elongating the pitch. And maybe that's something I'm gonna finish up this section. We can have a break. So maybe while on break, thinking about how you might elongate your pitch, and we can jump into that right after the break, and then we'll get into story. Because it sounds like everyone's struggling with lengthening or shortening, struggling with length of some variety. So let's dig into that afterwards. But for now, in terms of Carlin, how I worked, you saw how I worked with her. Other things that we did to the pitch was that we brought her, experience and mission to the top. And we'll talk a bit about Hook in a moment, because what I love about her is she actually had two hooks, which is really cool. So I'll get into that a little bit later, but we also shifted the focus onto the whys you saw, the customer story, key traction points, and use of funds. We added testimonials, logos, and impactful language, which many of you noticed. We added that we're in the business of giving people hope. And we worked on pacing and the pause, her going every second counts, because whenever she told me stories about the impact of this device, she always would say that. She would say, Melanie, every second counts. And she would continually say that. And I was like, say that. Like, that is something, that is your go-to language about this problem. That's going to feel authentic to you to say, and it's going to drive home a point at the beginning. And because you've already like set it up for like, I was a lifeguard for this many years and yada, yada, yada. And like, we know, we trust you a little bit more innately when you say every second counts, and you say it with that authority of someone who knows that. So listening for the way that you talk about your product a lot, and sometimes you do need an outside person or someone who's not you to be saying back to you, this is like, you're always saying this thing about your solution, your team, your problem, your why, yada, yada, yada. Really great to bring in your authentic voice, which is what she wanted, what Carla wanted. So that was important, that every second counts. Pause, even those 3-minute pitch, taking that pause, taking those seconds to say that, some people wouldn't have done. But for her, that was really a way for her to feel authentic in describing the problem and then the solution, and it just helped her feel better about how she was talking about this. We talked about the visual, we talked about the visuals and the design, as we mentioned. And I wanted to mention the things that are not in this pitch. So she doesn't talk about competition aside from saying the archaic methods. But this time we didn't really care, right? We were just like, oh, can you tell me more about the competition? And then she has a great answer for how they fit in the market. It didn't really matter this time. The first time it felt like it really mattered that she didn't talk about the competition and where they were in the market. This time, not so much. Also, she only talks about the Aqua Eye Sonar app. I don't know if anyone caught this in the first one. In the first pitch, she talks about two solutions. She talks about her Aqua Eye Solar handheld device and her app. The second one, she only mentions the app as a use of funds talking point. And that's because it was getting all muddled up. And every time we did the script, she talked out loud about it. She was like, I don't know how to talk about the app. Like, it's confusing. It's about data. Investors will like that. But like, I don't really like talking about it. And I was like, you know what? Let's just focus on this one thing. It's better to focus on one solution anyways at a time, especially like the one that you are focusing on and raising that's going to help you grow and help you get to scalability. And that the app that they're building, that might be the core solution in future pitches. Doesn't mean it's not going to be in the future, but for this one, it also didn't really, for that audience, it wasn't going to be like a value add to that audience. They weren't going to vote on her because she talks about an app in her pitch. So we cut that out and just saw how she felt about that. And immediately when she didn't say it and it wasn't on the slide, it was like a sigh of relief that she didn't have to talk about it. So if you are struggling with multiple aspects of, or maybe you have like multiple aspects of your solution like that, consider which one is the most impactful one to talk about for this audience, and just try out not talking about the other one or talking about it in a different way. And again, with financials, she said we broke even last year and doesn't really expand a lot on that. I think she talks a little bit, she has like one more sentence about financials. In a longer pitch, she probably would have talked more about her unit economics and different pieces, because there's nothing around from pricing or anything like that. But she had it all in her appendix because she knew that would be a question that would come up during Q&A, and she was able to bring up the slide that said, yes, this is all the things. But the most important thing is how it really made her feel. So I have 2 more slides to share, and then we'll take our break. So how did it make her feel? She said that she felt like herself, and she felt that her story resonated. And this was a really big win for her personally. She, of course, went on to win the $20,000 in the audience vote. She also has raised $4.1 million this past year in a very difficult to raise environment. It's been really hard. And I'm incredibly proud of the work that she's done or put into that. And I know it's difficult. Oops, I lost my slides again. Yeah, it is a really difficult environment to be raising in, particularly for certain industries. But yeah, and like she said, hers isn't a sexy tech product. It's a handheld device. And it's in an industry that is archaic, so it is a really difficult one to sell. But she's done an incredible job within that space. And then she is, I'm going to close. Can you still see the slides? Yes? Okay. So annoying that I can't go back. So I'm going to close with a few words that she said she would like to share with you. So she essentially said, unless you're doing a 3-minute timed pitch on stage, don't memorize your pitch. Just know your story, your why, and what your key points are, and then tell the story the way that you see it. She then said, prepare yourself for a marathon. It's going to be grueling and take way longer than you think. Make sure your team knows that fundraising is your #1 focus and that you're going to be at least 50% absent. get a data room ready, which I know that you are working on, and I know that we have a session coming up on data room. So that was one of our key things. Get a data room ready. Hook them with your idea in the pitch, but have documents to fill in all the gaps and answer all commonly asked questions. Fundraising is about momentum, and the more prepared you are to answer questions, the better. And lastly, take opportunities to pitch, even if you don't think it'll go anywhere or the fit isn't right. You'll learn something and get practice. So that was her takeaways that she wanted to share with the group. She also included her, when I send the deck, you can find her on LinkedIn, as well as her email. She said she'd be happy to connect with anyone, including investors. She is looking to close her round. So she's an amazing person to connect with and learn from as a founder as well. So that's the end of case study. Does anyone have anything that they would like to vocalize, questions, thoughts before we go on a break? If you had one thing that you're thinking right now. Nothing. Just gonna wait 2 seconds just to make sure.
Can we clone you and each have one of you to work with forever?
I don't think my heart could take it. No, yeah, no, I am here. I am one of the advisors of Sheepboot, so you are very welcome to book me one-on-one. And there's hope for Frankenstein decks. Yes, Jane, there are. And it wasn't even like it took 2 months. It was a lot of work. She was willing to put in the work. She was willing to ask for help. And she was willing to throw away things that she was really attached to, which can be very hard. But there is hope for sure. There is always hope. And I know there's varying degrees of hopefulness and hopelessness in this group, and we can help. We can get you back to a place of feeling hope. We are in the business of giving hope, not to the extent Carlin is, but yeah, no, you can absolutely book me. Happy to help. Cool. Should we take a 5-minute break then? Or is that the right amount of time, Katie? Cool. Sounds good.
Yep,
We'll
5
see you.
minutes.
Cool. We'll see you at. Great. All right. Welcome back. So as promised, I wanted to take a moment to talk about pitch length. So whether you're elongating or shortening, it sounds like most people are elongating. So I wanted to take a moment to focus on that, and then we will come back to hook, which sounds like many of you are comfortable with, but I'll do a little bit on that. Sorry, a bit on pitch narrative. Although you've kind of already seen a bit of my process through the case study, want to make sure you see what's available to you in the deck. And then keep in mind, as we're going through these next kind of 30 minutes or so, like what are key challenges that you would like us to talk through next? I'm thinking probably financials and numbers might be one of them, particularly on an elongated pitch, but keep in mind that, because I'll turn the mic over to you. So in terms of elongating the pitch, that is one that, let me just grab. I have a slide for this and some notes, but I would love to hear, we just saw 2 3-minute pitches back to back. And we saw where, like we made note of the pieces that she didn't speak to, which was kind of the competition, the financials, and those were kind of the 2 big ones that she didn't really elaborate on. So I'd be curious to hear from Leah, if you're ready to jump in, how, if you were working with Carlin and she'd come to you saying, okay, now I got to build up my 10-minute pitch, or if any of these cohort members come to you, what would be some areas when you're thinking about particularly pitching to this audience of 30 investors who are all making that one decision together, that care about serving, supporting, and uplifting and all the good things women investors, well, that as well, I'm sure, but women founders, what would be where you might suggest focusing on to elongate a pitch for this audience?
I think I would like to see a little bit more on the market opportunity specifically. You know, I don't love the whole, like, let me do the big Venn diagram of market opportunity, but what is that market opportunity? What are the trends or the I guess the untapped market that I can go after? So there was a little bit on that, like, kind of, again, it goes by so quickly in the pitch, but a little bit more on, again, I'm interested in the money, right? I want to know where the money's going to come from. So what's that market opportunity look like? What is your ICP, your ideal customer profile, and why? Where's that opportunity going to come from? Like, who are those people who are going to buy, and what do they care about, and why are they going to, why is that an opportunity? A little bit more on, I'm just like fleshing in the in-betweens, right? Because some of it is implied through the results, but what is your strategy? What is your strategy for tackling that market? How are you going about this? Even explaining that she had two parts of the product, the hardware device and the app and stuff. What is your strategy for addressing this problem? How are you doing that uniquely? Versus why are you best, in other words, why are you best able to capture that market opportunity that's sitting there? And then you're going to show that proof through your momentum, but it's really kind of understanding ultimately where the money's going to come from, right? There's this big untapped market. We've got a strategy to go after it. We're uniquely positioned to get that more than anyone else in the market. And I think those are the pieces that I would want to see fleshed out a little bit more up front. And then, of course, there are other metrics and milestones that you're going to want to see as an investor. And, if you've got a SaaS technology, you're going to be looking for that ARR growth. You're going to want to see new customer acquisition versus retention. You might want to see, all these things are of course vary on your journey, but there's going to be certain SaaS metrics that you're looking for that investors need to see. They need to see acquisition, retention, ARR. They want to see the rule of 40 if you can get there, which is your rate of growth plus your profit margin over time, or how close do you get into that rule of 40. Those are things that investors, those are the metrics, added metrics that they might want to see as you go up. But knowing that these are all early stage startups, the first thing is just, what are you going after? Why is it available to you? Why are you most able to capture that? Because I'm investing in you and your vision and your ability to do it. The one caution I would have is, and even my CEO was like this, is people get really wrapped around product details, and investors aren't necessarily in your space, in your technology. They need to have a very essential understanding of it, but don't get wrapped around product details, because that's where I think people go down a rat hole. Anyways, that's my two cents.
Yeah, absolutely. Jane.
I was just going to build on Leah's point about the ICP, the individual customer proposition. It'd be interesting, like the US Navy SEALs mention clearly was popular and it's impressive. So that might be kind of, if you're going to be elongate, you're like, take that one example and drill down, how did that go down? Like, how did it come about, kind of thing, so that you can, and then you can see, and then show how you're going to be able to replicate that kind of success, based on however they landed that deal.
Yeah. And to a question that came up last week, you'll notice in her pitch, she said she introduced this US Navy SEALs and one other customer that I can't remember right now, and then said, and we're in negotiations with others in these areas. So that was, someone asked last week, how do we talk about big key customers that are in the pipeline that aren't letting us talk about them? and we had some really great suggestions last week around, like, go back to them and actually ask, like what can I really not say and what can I say? So even the US Navy SEALs, she had confirmed that she was allowed to say that in that particular venue. And now it's fine to talk about it, but it was in like the final kind of stages. And then there was another one in final stages that she was like, hey, I can't talk about it, but I can say I'm in negotiations with these kinds of, which she didn't have in her first pitch, any kind of like insinuation or like direct language around these really big and impressive milestones that they'd hit and how they were going to capture the market that they said they were going to.
And I think that's the thing. There may be logos that you can never mention. And so you have to have a nice generic way of referring to them in their space that they're in, large financial institution or whatever. But knowing as an investor that you have an idea of your ideal customer and that it's repeatable, to Jane's point, that's money, right? Like if I know what I'm going after and I can keep getting those same kind of customers, that's great. It's a problem with being a startup is that you often take whatever comes at you in terms of opportunities. Growth comes when you can really focus in on a particular lane and repeat it, so.
Yeah, really great suggestion. So my content that I have in addition to, or the compliments and in addition to what they were just speaking to, Leah and Jane, thank you. So in terms of elongating your pitch, you can, if you haven't already, you can have that hook and then activate your story in a more robust way, not taking up a lot of the pitch, but with 12, 15 minutes, whatever it happens to be, you do have a little bit more of that space to do that so that you're ensuring that you are engaging your audience from the start, which can be even more important in a long pitch, especially if the investors are watching 15 of them, like they will be. So watching 10 to 15 minute pitches and then Q&A, that's a lot, especially if you know you're going to be later on in the lineup, or if you don't know where you are in the lineup. And really regardless, but they are going to be fresher at the beginning. That's just how our brains work. I'm assuming they'll have breaks, I'm hoping, but maybe not. A lot of time they don't. So having that like engaging and memorable hook at the beginning and story at the beginning is going to be even just that much more important in a space like this, where you know that they're watching so many over and over again that are longer ones. Capture the market. So this was already touched on. So how will you capture that market? Data points on market size, growth projections, customer acquisition strategy, really important. Make sure you are talking about your business model and that it's clear, which sounds obvious, but isn't always. Sometimes the business model is not there, or it's not clearly defined, or it has kind of like multiple pieces to it, or like in Carlin's case, where she was saying, we have two solutions and it's two different customers and two different business models, and it was getting too complicated to talk about that. So think about how you're presenting that. And in financials, we can dig into that more, but appreciate everything that was already provided by Leah to talk about those revenue streams, pricing, projections, unit economics, like economics of a single transaction, and potentially any assumptions that you have. Now, to points that we've already made, you don't have to have everything, because again, if you have a compelling enough pitch and your trust me pitch is strong enough and your problem solution is strong, they'll ask questions about numbers as well. So don't feel like you have to have everything in there. And ideally, you don't have absolutely everything in there, because you can also strategically leave things out, knowing that they'll probably ask that question if you have a really compelling answer for that. Now, I say address the elephants in the room. So that is like, well, like with Carlin's, which was like, well, you don't even mention your competition. Like that's a big elephant, red flag in the room. So I think we talked about last week when it's kind of like a fad space that you're in. So I saw a lot of people pitching on like NFT things, or there was one that I remember they were pitching on like a solution for people who were in the lockdown, and people were like, cool, but like what happens after lockdown lifts? And they didn't have an answer for that, first of all, so that wasn't great. But it was such a clear elephant in the room of like, this is so specific to the next, we didn't know how long, but we hoped and assumed not that long, relative to like the life cycle of the company. So let's address that kind of an elephant that's in the room, or you can leave the elephants if you want them to ask questions, but know what, again, like know what kind of questions your investors are asking. And a big elephant in the room is going to be like privacy and data, depending on the space that you're in. A lot of you are in like the health tech space, so that is going to be something that's going to come up. IP strategy is also often something that's going to come up. So those are kind of key pieces, especially in a 10+ minute pitch, that you can touch on. And you don't need to go into great lengths, knowing they'll probably ask you about privacy anyways, and they'll want a more detailed response, but that you've even thought about it, like thought about patient data. That's going to be an important piece for them to know that you've considered it at all. And then the trust me, bold and underlined, you know me and my trust me pitch. So showcase the team and advisors, why you're uniquely positioned to succeed, to Leah's point. As I already mentioned, patent strategy and customer data points and brags. So brags are great. So that was, and Carlin saying we broke even. So think about, when you're thinking about financials, think about your financial story, or what story your financials tell. And are there key elements in there to make sure you're, you know, bold and underlining, either with visuals or the way that you're talking about your company. So those are kind of some elements of what I would talk about in terms of elongating your pitch. But I'd love to know, is there something, would anyone like to come forward with any specific kind of questions you have around elongating your pitch for your company, your pitch in particular?
Yeah, sorry, I've lost the hand button. I can't remember how to do it, even though I did it. Yeah, so because we're therapeutics, and we're the sort of the big feedback that I got from the coach, particularly in the beginning, was it was way too science heavy. So it came across more like a science project than it did a business. And in addressing that, kind of paring down the science part of it, is in the elongation. How far do I go there? You know, so it's and that may be a specific conversation, but that's kind of really a kind of key topic for me. Is like I go for the 10-minute version now, or the longer version. How sort of sciencey do I make it?
That's a great question. That would really depend on your audience. So knowing your audience, but you're probably not pitching people who are in your science field, particularly. So I invite Jane and Lee, of course, to jump in here as well. And also, I'm sure there's others who have come up against this, either in their current pitch or in past pitches in the cohort. So if you have found a way to, if someone gave you great advice, please do also jump in and share with Jane. Definitely like keeping the jargon out of there. And sorry, I'm just seeing a comment. No problem, Dolma. See you later. So keeping the jargon out of there. Remember, you're not here in the capacity as a teacher. You're not giving a lecture, which is sometimes, particularly if you come from that science background or teaching background or lab background, it can be hard to get out of that headspace, especially if you've gotten the feedback of, I don't get it, this is confusing. So probably working one-on-one with someone to really tailor down, like when you're talking about the science of it, are you talking about the science of the problem or the solution, or both?
A little bit of both. And I think we've done quite a nice job of not simplifying it, but there's a number of complexities for this particular therapeutic area that it's hard to know where to balance too much background on the disease area, and but without losing why it is that we have got a unique proposition, because we do uniquely address something that nobody else does. So it's a little bit on the problem, but then also on the solution.
We do have probably,
so it's yeah.
Yeah, no, it's a common problem that we see, and often is not addressed in pitches, and then you get a really dry pitch, unfortunately, and you see a lot of them. So probably if we were to work together, we would talk through, how do you talk about this solution and problem to a friend? How do you talk to someone who doesn't have any science background? What are some, exactly what I did with Carlin, like, do you have a story of a customer or a fictitious customer, if you don't have one, around what their pain point is and how would they, or what their pain point or lived experience? It could be the user or the customer in your case, if it's different. And how do they, a story that illustrates the impact that it's going to create for them. But to Leah's point, also then layering on that lens of what does the investor care in terms of the impact that it's creating. So I would say you don't want a lot of science-y stuff in there. Unless you happen to be pitching one-on-one to an investor you know has a science background, particularly in your area of science, and maybe you are looking for that. And maybe you're even seeking that out to get feedback on how to talk about science in that your area of science in that pitch. But typically we would say like just pare down that, and we would work together on how do we tell a story in a way that's going to resonate. And not take up half the pitch, which it tends to if you go into lecture style content. And Leah, I see you're off mute.
Yeah, I was going to, I mean, I've faced this all my career because I've always been in tech, and it is really different if you're talking to customers because they're already in that space. But an investor tends to not have the technical background, or even if they are tech investors, they have a general understanding, but not necessarily exactly in your space. I think one of the biggest challenges and rewards, if you can get there, is to find a way of describing your uniqueness really in a short phrase that you can just use over and over and over and over again. And I'll use an example. About 10 years ago, we had our uniqueness in cybersecurity with something called agentless security. And it sounds really simple, and no one, you're not going to immediately know what that means, but we kept using it over and over again. It became like the way of defining our uniqueness in the market. And even our investors knew, oh, you're the ones with that agentless security, so it was using a term that, you could kind of understand what that meant, right? But, they're never going to understand the full details of what you do. And so trying to find a way can you use a common word or, a phrase that is memorable to call out your uniqueness and use it over and over and over again, without it just being AI, by the way, because everyone says AI. So what is it about AI that makes your technology, is it AI driven, something that causes it to be unique, and just hammer that over and over again so that they remember, oh, you're the ones with that, blah, blah, blah. But yeah, you'll never be able to go into the detail enough for them to fully get it. So you just have to build that confidence that, you've got this thing, you've got the secret sauce, and it's called this, and repeat it.
That's great. I love that. And it kind of makes the trust me part all the more important.
Yeah. And I'd love to also understand better, not right now, but at another time, understand better like the past, present, and future context of your company, because to me, like, explaining all the science stuff is a bit of like the past. Like, if you already have something that works and something that people are buying, that stuff doesn't matter as much in the pitch. So like, that's what Carlin did, right? Like, she didn't go into the details of the science. She didn't, in the final pitch, she didn't go into the technical pieces of the problem, like why the archaic technology doesn't work. She can talk, she's an engineer, like she can talk about that forever, but she doesn't, right? Because it doesn't matter, because it's already working. It's like so she focused in her pitch on present and future instead of getting lost in the past, which is, if you're really early stage and you don't have a lot of traction, maybe you're going to focus a little bit more on past and future. So you're more selling on the vision and the team and the why me, why this, why now, and the future vision. But if you already have key traction, you don't need to like wade in the waters of like, trust me, this is a problem, because if people are buying it, then obviously it's a problem for someone. So that's a way that I also consider. It depends on where you are in your journey as well, to an extent.
One of the things I liked about Carlin, just to your point, was she talked about the ability to scan the size of a football field, right? So I can't remember if she used that in her final pitch. I know she did in the first one, but I immediately resonated with that, because I don't know how this stuff works, but I understand that it scans the size of a football field. That's pretty cool. So it related something very, from a simple life into the technology output or the impact statement of what that technology can do without having to describe how it worked, right?
Yeah.
I understood the impact of it versus the bits and bobs underneath.
Yeah, I was going to
then
make
you
the
can-
same point about the technology or the sciencey stuff as opposed to getting into the sciencey stuff. What is the impact of that? Like if it's a health thing, what is the health issue that your product is then solving? Not so much the disease or not so much the under which you'll just go down a rat hole trying to explain that. Right?
Yeah. And then you can get into the details on the technical aspects of the technology in your data room and if they bring it up in due diligence questioning. So that's what that is meant for. So make sure that you do have that, again, not in like a muddled, overwhelming way in your data room, but in a really clear and concise as possible kind of way. And then they can always ask for more information and you'll be able to provide that.
And by the way, mentioning things like patent pending, or we've already got 5 patents around this stuff, that gives people a ton of confidence, right? If it is something that's patentable, that those kind of little proof points without, again, saying how it works, just obviously it works, right?
Yeah. If it's out there and it's working, then it's working. Yeah. That's the, like we made a lot of assumptions based on Carlin's pitch that she didn't have to talk about. So, which I love, which is also one of the beauties of the customer story. Because it allows us to assume that there is a product that someone's already using and that it works, and that it creates the impact that they want to create, and that they want to make more of them and want to create a bigger impact and therefore need money to do that. Like it kind of beautifully demonstrates that if you happen to have a really great customer story to tell. I'm a big fan of that. Okay, so great. So we're gonna, oh, sorry, is there anyone else on elongating or shortening that you have a burning question that's bothering you? Or you can write it down and write to us later if you'd like. Okay, looks like we're good. So I'm gonna jump back into storytelling for your pitch. We're gonna start with the hook, get into narrative a bit. I will kind of try to get through this a bit, I won't say quicker, but let's see how it goes. We'll see how it goes. And take note of any questions that you have along the way. Again, you can put your hand up. Feel free to interject as you have questions or thoughts on what we're talking about. Okay, let me get back to the right slide here. Okay, so storytelling for your pitch, talking about the hook. So I think we all at this point understand the value of having story within our pitches. It's interesting because when I first started in this space in 2016, it wasn't understood. There was very little storytelling in pitch. There was a whole like movement with Simon Sinek of the Start With Why movement, and that started to get people thinking like, oh, maybe I should talk about my why, and maybe I should like care about this. But that was not, I don't remember what year that video came out, but it was around that time. At least when I was working in the Vancouver ecosystem, it was still a fairly new concept. And I find that people now understand a bit better why we need to incorporate story. But since I'm a sciencey person myself, I'm going to go against what I just told you. No, I'm just going to really briefly touch on the science of it because I think it's interesting. My dad was a professional storyteller, so this is something that I really love, and I'm a professional writer myself. So I love story, and I love it because it was one of our earliest languages as humans, and we're hardwired to connect and retain, to connect with and retain stories. It activates more parts of our brain. And what that means is that it triggers a cascade of hormones that work in your favor as founders. So we have dopamine, which helps with focus and recall, not just for your audience, but for you as well, which is really important. Also can trigger oxytocin, which is going to be, that's like the trust and likability hormone, empathy hormone. And then we have endorphins, which what's the word? Bring out relaxation again and focus. And story also helps you describe the solution and takes away that transactional and robotic feel. It takes away that Frankenstein problem solution opportunity ask, ticking the boxes feel of it. So I am a big fan. And I remember telling this story or teaching this class for the first time in January 2020. And people were still, even at that time, they were a little bit like hesitant about telling story in a pitch and taking up space in a pitch for that, which was interesting. And no one was talking about the narrative pitch that really in a big way. So it's fairly like new, even though it feels really normal. And I found actually now it's kind of swung in the other direction, where sometimes people lean into pitch and problem solution for far too much of their pitch, and that ends up being like the main focus, and then they're not actually getting to the opportunity, the trust me pitch, which is really important. Jane, to your point, like we're talking like within a 10-minute pitch, like you want to get through problem solution pretty quickly. Like in the orbital pitch that I did last week, I think I spent 2 of my 4 minutes on problem solution. 2 minutes would be okay in a 10-minute pitch. In a 4-minute pitch, that was too long. So obviously it depends on what how the length of your pitch itself, but yeah, it's interesting to have seen how how storytelling has changed within a pitch has changed over time. Okay, so there's 2 facets of storytelling. This is another reason I love storytelling for the pitch. It's very strategic and interesting because we have the hook that's infusing the story within the pitch itself. That might be an anecdote or a customer story or whatever happens to be. And then we have the narrative pitch, which we were talking about, which is that polar opposite of the Frankenstein pitch, where each element has a point and serves to strengthen the argument that you and your company are worth taking a risk on. It requires a lot of time and intention to build a narrative pitch, though. This is not something we can fix in a workshop or in one session. Usually it takes a couple of sessions, but I was talking to Katie about this on the break. It doesn't take that long. Like Carlin and I, it was over 2 months, but it was actually only, I think it was 3 hours of face-to-face conversation or coaching. And then there was asynchronous conversation. And then on her side, she was doing a lot of work, getting feedback, practicing all the things, which you'll be doing through SheBoot anyways. So it doesn't take an extremely extraordinary amount of time. Usually I'll do like a 45-minute session with someone, and then we might have a 1-hour session afterwards. And sometimes that's it. So it can be quite quick to get to where you want to get to, which is cool because usually you already know everything that you need to have in a pitch. And it's just a matter of finding a way to make it into that narrative. So the narrative pitch will also help you feel more authentic in your pitch, and it'll be more memorable to you. So people usually start with the hook. That's the main thing you see people focusing on. And then they start to work on the narrative pitch. Now, one of the problems with this kind of culture shift of having a story is that people start to feel like I have to have a story, even if I don't feel like I have one. And then they start to interject stories that didn't actually fit with the rest of their pitch. So again, being really intentional about the story that you're telling. Why am I telling it to this particular audience? You might have multiple stories for multiple different kinds of audiences that you're working with. But here's some examples of ones that we often see in terms of the hook. So we have one called, what I like to call the YOY, which is why you care about your solution and or problem. And with this, you're creating connection and relatability with an audience, and you're triggering them to care. So this is the orbital pitch I made last week on June 11th, 2023, I went into labor with. This could be with like Carlin's. I've been a lifeguard for over a decade, so I know. And it could be, does anyone else, well, you probably have your own YOY pitches about why I'm doing what I'm doing. You hear them all the time. So there's the YOY, then there's the why me, which is usually around team. So that's lived experience, skill set, track record, something that's where it says something about the characteristic of those on the team, maybe that they're adaptable, their figure it outness. This is an interesting one because it's not really a customer story. It's not like a way that a lot of people start their pitches. So even Carlin saying, I've been a lifeguard, because I've been a lifeguard for over a decade, I know what it looks like, or like the impact that it has on families to have a drowning, to see someone drowning. A lot of people will get into like I've been at this for this many years after their hook. Now, why we move that to the front and why some people do is if it's a really compelling trust me element. It's something that they're maybe getting questioned all the time. Like, why do you care about this? Like, what is your, like, especially if you don't have a background in the industry that you're working in, but you do have a really, like maybe someone on your team has a really strong background in it. So for instance, I worked with a company that there was a lot of market doubt around what they were developing, which was an app for developing stories for kids, or like to gamify something for kids. And so what they ended up starting with, because they were getting a lot of like, there's a lot of competition. How are you going to stay out? Like, I don't know. She noticed that everyone, when she started talking about her team in the pitch, which was at the end of her pitch, would then be like, oh, yeah, you've got this. But if she put that at the top of the pitch, then they would listen to the rest of the pitch without that mindset of like, I don't know about this. Because you want them to ideally be listening to your whole pitch, being like, okay, yeah, maybe, right? So in her case, her team all had come from Disney. So they had decades of experience working with kids, and they know what kids like and want. And they worked in animation, and they were creating an app that was exactly that. So it was like, oh, and there was an investor who heard that, and once she switched that to the top, and this investor was just like, yeah, I'm in. Don't even need to like have a conversation, which usually is not the case. but in this case, it was a compelling enough story to pull to the top. So that's the why me. Again, people don't usually start with that, but around like the team, but it can be really compelling depending on the kind of questions you're noticing people are asking. So another really compelling one is the customer story. I know I've talked about that a lot. I've talked about the real customer story. You'll also hear fictitious customer stories for an earlier stage company. So that like meet Andrea, a 35-year-old woman who struggles with. So that, again, can be really useful, particularly if you keep getting questions like, I don't understand how this solution works, or I don't understand your ideal customer. And it can also be useful for like a 2-sided or 3-sided marketplacey kind of situation where you can walk us through how is this actually going to create impact for these users? Why would they even be a part of this? Why, like, how are you even going to how are you going to stock the shelves and fill the aisles, or whatever that saying is? Like, how are you going to make this work? And what does that look like without using a bazillion words to try to explain, because it can get really complicated in the pitch. So this one's a customer story is really great if you're trying to clear up market doubt or explain a complicated solution. So the other one that we call is what we I don't know where I heard this years ago. I don't know who the we is called. The BFF principle, which is the best foot forward principle. Again, speaks to like the woman who brought the team element up to the front. So that's the one of like, hi, I'm excited to share. Hi, I'm whatever my name is. I'm so excited to share with you that we just closed, or we just won, or we just, again, you don't hear that often at the top, but in certain situations, if you have just closed something really big and exciting, that can be a really great way to open. And I've seen it done in really, really beautifully, because the speaker, like the pitcher themselves, they start on such an excited note, and you can see their passion from the start. And so it was a really great tool for that pitcher to celebrate. And it kind of brings the audience, they want to celebrate you. They want to be a part of that. Again, it sets them up to already be like, oh, they're already winning. And so I wouldn't recommend this always, but if you do have a really big, exciting piece of news, you can play around with how that feels. Especially maybe in like a competition kind of a scenario, like at an event, a conference. So you can play around with these different strategies. This other one that's in the corner here, that in 2014, I was one of 5.4 million people who immigrated to Canada in the past 2 decades. So she was positioning herself as an expert in the space. Like she was developing, what's the name of the company? Street Food World, I think is the name of the company. Really, really great company, creating food I can't remember all the details, I'm sorry. But the point is that she was positioning herself within as an expert of this immigrant community, also wanted to connect with investors who care about newcomers and immigrants to Canada, and maybe have a similar background. So again, we talked about last year being strategic and filtering out, like using language to filter out different kinds of investors, maybe has had difficulty with certain kinds of investors and knows that if they use this kind of language, they won't have to deal with that kind of a persona. So that was part of that strategy. Oh, I see in the chat there's something here. Oh, never mind. It's a direct message. I'll get back to that later. So these are some kind of common hooks. And as we talked about, Carlin's was beautiful because she had 2. She had the mission statement at the beginning to save lives. She had the why, like I was a lifeguard and I saw this and this was a problem. And then she went into her customer story that was memorable, impactful, and real. So because she started off with that mission and why, the way she talked changed. And she was able to get through through the customer story, she was able to explain the problem, the pain point, and that it's a mission-driven approach and solution. So I'm not going to do this exercise now, but if you are struggling with your your hook, which it sounds like most people are feeling fairly confident about it, but if now or in the future you are struggling again, one thing you can do, and I'll create a document with more information on this. Here I just have kind of like, what's your favorite story what's your favorite story to tell about your company, but I'll put some more details later in terms of prompts that you can go through for telling your story. And if this is something you really want to talk about shortly, and just like kind of, where are we at? Yeah, in about 10 minutes or so, then please do bring that up. So the narrative pitch, this is repairing the Frankenstein. I think we've already kind of dug a lot into this. So I don't want to go over the exact same things over and over again, but what I wanted to cover is why the exercises I did with, or that Carlin and I did together, why those happened to work. So with her narrative pitch, yes, we talked about, she had good use of transitions and structure, sprinkled that trust dust along the way or all throughout the pitch, and had that audience lens. So thought about who is her audience, who did she want to attract, what do they care about, what questions do they ask? But why did this all work? Because before she'd even worked with me, she had identified the type of investor that she wanted, and she'd identified what she wanted from her pitch, which was for it to feel authentic, true, and to showcase the mission and vision, so that she was finding an investor who would buy into the mission and vision. So that needed to be paramount. It's why she brought it to the top. And then she also says it at the end, and she says it in a few different ways in a couple different areas of the pitch. It really drives home, like, if you want to save lives, come to me. If you want to be a part of this, come with me. Every second counts, yada, yada, yada. Like, it's all these really like impact mission driven kind of language to attract that to her. She was also open to trying new things. And as I mentioned before, put in the work. So when you're working on your own or in groups or with myself or a different coach, some of the different kind of exercises that you can start with or revisit along the way in future is to do a bit of a temperature check. Again, looking at how do you feel, where does my energy go, that kind of an exercise. You can go back to basics where you're going through your script, pulling out your story, your why and your key highlights, and then try pitching without your deck, try pitching without your script, see what naturally comes out. That's something that I love to do, is like, once I feel like I have it down when I'm reading it out loud, I then get rid of the script altogether, and I'll try doing it without a script or a deck and record myself. And you might be surprised what happens, especially if you do try doing this when you haven't practiced it like a gazillion times already, so it's not already memorized. Because to Carlin's point, it's great if you don't memorize every word, but you can just, because that way you can get on track if you've gotten off track. But what's interesting when you do this is when you do forget something, and then your brain kind of like makes different connections and you just keep going. And then when you listen back, listen to how you talked about the next element when you didn't have any script or deck, because that might be a more natural way for you to talk about it. Or you might listen to it and be like, ugh, that didn't work at all. I need to like highlight literally with a highlighter and cue cards to try to remember how I want to say this sentence. Like, you'll make that decision yourself, but it can be a really interesting exercise to see what will come out when you have no crutches, so to speak. And then what I call the exercise that I call what I really, really want. So that's exactly what Carlin did, which is the questions of what your goals are for this pitch and this audience. And coming back to that, going through your script, going through your deck, listen to, so record yourself with and without the pitch, or sorry, with and without the deck. And then kind of go back with a fine-tooth comb of, does this pitch reflect the person that the ideal investor or audience member that I'm trying to reach here? And does it reflect the kinds of questions that they're going to be asking? Sorry, one sec. So once you have done these kind of basic exercises with, again, yourself, your peers, coach. My gosh, I'm losing my voice here. Then you can go through again with help. Often is really great to think about where can I sprinkle that trust dust, the patent pendings, the way that you talk about your team, bringing up key highlights, all those different little pieces. Where can you put those? And then practice. And as we talked before, when you're practicing, ask the audience for the kind of feedback that you want, or try doing that and see what comes out of that. Take note of common questions, take note of questions that maybe annoy you, so that maybe you will address those in the pitch, or you'll find out a way to answer it that your annoyance doesn't come through, because it does. No matter what, if someone asks you a question in Q&A, if you feel annoyed, we will see it. And then that will also translate to potentially feeling like the founder's not coachable. And if you remember from last week's slides, the like coachability of a founder does definitely come into account when investors are deciding, particularly at this stage, the angel investors are deciding if they're going to invest. And then polish. So thinking about where are you still stumbling and forgetting things at the end when you're doing it over again without the deck, without the script. Do you really need all of those points? Revisit your transition words to the point of like Carlin using really impactful statements. So like have someone go through and highlight potential words that you could change. And and then I have some other ideas on polish that I'll include later on. So we are at 1:30 now. So it's been 2 hours. I know it's been a lot, and I've been a lot of like talking at you for the last few slides. So I want to close that for a moment and understand where's everyone at in terms of how they're feeling about building their next steps in building their pitch narrative, and where maybe are there any kind of challenging points that you would like to talk through? So how are you feeling about your pitch? Week 2, She Boot. I have no problem waiting through awkward silences. I know you must be all feeling something. Cheryl.
I feel like, I mean, I mentioned this last week, but like, because we've gone through this like big transition, I feel like we're starting completely from scratch. And that's like, I have like in all my notes, I've got like questions. I'm like, okay, how do I do this with a transition? And the big one for me is like, is the hook. I have like we had a really compelling story for why we started Made, why we started an apparel company. And then we have like our journey of going through that and realizing like, this is a bigger problem than us. And how are we going to like bring this to the world in a bigger way? But I just don't feel like I have a story that I can use for that, other than like, well, our business grew and we grew as people. Like,
so that like, this is where we started and this is how we shifted based on like iteration, like feedback and iteration.
Yeah, and product market fit. Like we weren't finding product market fit, or we weren't growing fast enough as an apparel brand. And we wanted to grow faster, and the bigger market is the technology company. Which is true and valid, but also like we do have a really compelling story for how we got here. I struggled to tell it effectively, or to find how to tell it.
Yeah, it's an interesting question. I think so when we're talking about the different kinds of potential hooks, so you're talking about like you had the YOY kind of story, right? So there's kind of 2 approaches where I'd probably want to understand like what your why pitch is. I mean, that's something you can do if you're comfortable doing right now, and have like a succinct kind of, this is what it was and this is what it feels like now, then maybe we can walk through that together.
Yeah, so I've been in the outdoor industry for over 15 years, making some of the highest quality outdoor brands for some of the best brands in the world. In that time, I've never had a ski jacket or pair of pants that fit me. And I was making product that fit me. I was advocating for size inclusivity and even size adjustments within product, when I was being told that I wasn't the person that did this. When I skied 3 times a week, rock climbed 3 times a week, I was at the most fit I've ever been. And I was a size 12 or 14, and stuff still never fit me. And brands don't make products over a size 14. And even within sizing, it doesn't fit people. So that's why we started the like apparel brand, and then we went from bigger from there.
And what is it now?
We do technology for made to measure automation. Like, what is I hook, or like the company?
No, yeah, no, exactly what you just said. Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, that sounds still related in my brain. Like, I get that your brain goes to, oh, they must have created a apparel company, but it's still a solution for the same pain point and problem, but on a bigger scale, right? So like so what I would probably do is look at like, okay, do we want to still use the YOY, or are you at a different stage in your company and it actually makes more sense for us to focus on the why me, the customer story, or something else? I mean, I think that story can still be used in order to get to that solution, because we were talking about last week, that the problem is essentially set up for the solution. It's your case for why you built the solution. So if you think about your solution being the made to measure, so I guess is one of the problems you're thinking like that the problem is also or maybe the story speaks more to the user of like the buyers, whereas the people that are now buying, I'm assuming is it B2B more so?
Yeah, our ICP and our business model have changed. We were D2C, and so I had like a really strong like, this is why a customer human wants this type of product, and now we're selling to brands. And like in reality, we created the technology because we were a brand that needed the technology. And so I'm wondering if I might try to phrase it as like, well, now that we're a new entity, Made is a client of the technology brand. So I might tell it from the like customer story, but it's actually us.
That you were building an apparel company and realized that the main pain point was that you didn't have a made to measure kind of a tool that actually worked, because most of them are complete trash, essentially.
It just didn't, it literally didn't exist.
Interesting. Yeah. So that's I mean, as I always encourage, like try it out, like craft what that would look like, try it out, and then work with your coach, or you can book me and we can talk about if that still works. We might go back to your original story and find a way to transition it there, or might use something else completely. But that's interesting that I don't think you need to go into a lot of like your like past, like talking about like, this is what we built and then that didn't work, and so we did this. Like, it does show your ability to pivot and be agile, and I like that, but let's not dwell on it. So we can find a way to insinuate that you are a founder, that you became your own customer and are now doing this. Like, it's not other people, you're not the only company in the world that this is the route they've taken, where they've realized that there's a bigger pain point that they need to address before they can then address their next, or then continue if you choose to build out an apparel company as well. So I think there's a few things we would do with that, but it is an interesting one to think about. Sandra, I see your hands up. Is this in relation to what Cheryl's going through, or your own?
No, sorry, I had a question at the same time. It took me a long time to figure out how to put the hand up. I'm sorry.
Oh, no, not a problem. No, we'll jump over to you next, but I would be curious to hear if Leah, you have any thoughts for Cheryl as well, or if anyone else in the cohort has gone through something like this or has any ideas.
Well, I kind of liked the personal aspect of that story. Like, I kind of liked the way she said, hey, we're going along, and then there was a personal hook there that said, I realized I'm, here I am, this active person, and I didn't have the sizing for me. Like, it was like the discovery of the problem, but in a very personal way. That's why you're passionate about this, right? So again, it's about you and your passion for this. And again, I wouldn't dwell too much on how the former business was doing. It's just like, while we were doing this business, we uncovered this untapped, hopefully huge market that no one is addressing. And we realized we had the capability and the unique skill set to go after it. And it's a very personal thing.
Yeah, maybe I'll book something with you, Melanie, because I feel like it does kind of get a little bit muddier. Like MAID is still an operation, but investors don't like that. So like we're trying to not talk about it, but also talk about it in a way that like MAID is our customer. So I'll book something and we can go deeper because that I think it's really important for our pitch right now.
Right. Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Sorry, who had their hand up before? Was Sandra the name?
Yes.
Yes, Sandra, there you are.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I would like to answer your question, how it's feeling. I feel like always feeling progress, and then at the same time, like there's still so much to do. That's kind of how I've been feeling after every session. But I think that's I keep telling myself that's a good thing. So just keep going. But on today's subject, I thought to ask for your advice on, or anybody else, about how to speak about the competition or the alternatives, sometimes without sounding negative. So we are bringing to market like a tech-powered solution that we're positioning as a retention and advancement for women in the workplace, which is something we're really passionate about as women in STEM and consulting. And we feel like we have a really good, practical and simple solution that puts women on the right path. So, but when we talk about this, we get a lot of kind of like, oh, and we don't have this problem, which they all pretty much do because the numbers in the industry just are what they are. And also, or they're doing a lot of work that's being done is either a checkbox exercise, like, oh, we have a women's group that meets, oh, we got this. But ultimately, when you talk to those women, and we are the women, and we're friends with those women, nobody ever has come to us with being like, a women's group has solved my problems. Like, women are still leaving. There's all the data to show the problem exists, but ultimately, when we talk to people, especially let's say in HR, where we end up, it ends up being a lot of like, sorry, and this is not the BD side, but still just talk about how the fact that the solutions out there are, ultimately not addressing the problems without offending anybody about what they're doing. And, without saying also, we got something figured out that nobody else has, or, just so sounding like obnoxious, and also saying that the others are not effective. So, but without, again, sounding negative, especially in this space where you want to encourage, investment. So just wondering if there is, any advice that comes to mind on, how to speak about the ineffectiveness of your competitors' solutions.
That's interesting. I would probably want to dig into your feelings around wanting to protect the feelings of your competitors. Like I understand what you're saying, but I also like so to me, what I'd want to understand, what I'd want to walk away is even more so than you saying, like being so concerned around how the other competitors feel. I want to actually believe that what you've developed is going to make a big difference and how it's different from the competitors. So that's, and like you want to quantify how it's different. So you can position it as differences. It's kind of like when Carlin was saying to me, like, I have to talk about it being a tragedy. Like I have to, like, if this is something you're really passionate about, like, I don't want to walk away from this pitch feeling like I've put down any of the competitors. That's the exact thing I want to know when you're walking into a pitch session with me, or with anyone else, is that you define, like, it's important for me that this is what, like, having a moral compass in my pitch looks like for me. Then we'll find a way to work with that. I completely understand what you're talking about, because so my other job is that I'm a qualitative researcher and lead researcher and board member at Women in Tech World. So we conduct qualitative research with women in STEM, or with government and organizations and community to better understand the barriers and experiences of women in STEM. So when you're saying to me, this is a problem, I'm like 100%. But I also have worked with enough of these organizations to know that they say, no, it's not a problem, even when I'm handing them the report that says, this is what all of the women in your workplace are saying. So it is a difficult customer. It's maybe something that I'd be curious about. Are there any other business models that you have considered, or customers that you've considered? So that's something that maybe would be something to talk about. But if this is the right fit in terms of your market that you've addressed and your ideal target customer, then then it would be more so about how do we talk about how you stand out within where you fit in the market and how you are different and how you are going to win and why I should trust that you're doing something different. Because I think that's the thing, is that especially because like people who are in the industry know that a lot of what we've tried and what has been invested in, like hundreds of that, like not even hundreds of thousands, like millions of dollars from the government have been spent on programs that don't work. Like we know that. Well, people who are entrenched in the research and are doing that work know that. So why should we trust that yours does work? That's if they know a lot. So if it's me, that would be my thing. It's like, I want to actually see this. I want to see what are you talking about? Like tidal equity, they are like really research driven, have really good approach to things. And I like the way they talk about it is very, they've had to learn to have a lot of confidence in saying this works for this reason, and here is how we're quantifying why it works. And they had to get out of their comfort zone with that, and just be like, we are backing, we stand behind our approach. It is we have an IP strategy around it. This is why it works and why we're different. And so probably with you would be a little bit of like building confidence around talking about it in that humble break kind of way. Leah, go ahead.
I was just going to emphasize, like, I don't think you can shy away from, you don't have to name specific competitors or competitive solutions, but you have to be able to classify them and put them in a corner. You have to be able to say, unlike, perhaps your homegrown HR efforts, which do this, or unlike, these off-the-shelf solutions that do this, they are limited in this way. We are the only, solution that can bring this fresh approach to do. And I'm sorry, I don't know exactly what you do, but we're the only one that brings this fresh approach. You have to be able to classify and separate yourself from the other competitors. And, a classic marketing technique is to find a way to negatively frame them, but in a, and at the same time positively frame yourself. In the tech world, that's often like, we're the next gen solution of this, unlike these traditional approaches, right? So you choose a negative frame. Traditional in that case means bad, next gen equals good, right? So you have to find a way to frame the old solutions or traditional approaches in a way that makes them out of date. And your thing has a new moniker on it, and that is the positive framing. But you have to be able to say why you're different and better. It's like any good elevator pitch, right? Unlike the competition that offers this, or unlike point solutions that offers this, we do this and we do it better and we offer this value, and here's the proof. So you can't shy away from it. You don't have to name competitors specifically. You just have to be able to classify them and put them over there.
Okay, thank you. That's actually, both of those are actually really helpful. Makes me also think we have definitely been focused on business development pitching. So investment pitching is, we're relatively one of those new ones to that. But I wonder actually, as we, if that's actually going to help us, because we're so worried about offending, because ultimately we're talking about people who have chosen. It's not I'm not actually worried about offending competitors, but we're offending the people who are bringing those programs in. And often also with HR, it's like they don't actually sometimes feel the problems as much because they are in HR, which is one of the most women-led functions in companies, so a lot of times we're explaining something that they don't feel. So we have this kind of like double face, like we feel like double face like problem, but maybe the pitching to the investors is going to help us practice more of this direct approach. You reframing it differently. I really like that. Thank you.
And it can help them. And when you're talking to customers, you can find a way to validate their decision. That was the right decision at that time. But now facing these new challenges, and you cannot address these new challenges with yesterday's technology and yesterday's approach. So you can validate that what they, the decision they made before might have been the right decision at the time. Right. But now that's no longer valid.
Yeah. Thank you very much.
Awesome. Thank you. So we have about 5 minutes left, I think, until I switch the mic back over to Katie, right? Okay, that's it. Yeah. Amazing. So did anyone else want to come forward with your concerns you have? I know, again, financials was a piece people brought up. Is that something you want to dive into at all? How are people feeling? I got 2. How are your feelings about your pitches? Where are there still hesitations?
I would just say my only question, comment, etc., is on that financial piece is whenever you're, elongating something, how much you really want to dive into numbers, like real technical numbers. I guess that goes both to financial, but also to the tech side when we talked about diving into the science. Being in the software space, everybody wants to know a lot of the time in like question and answer of like your data set and where it was built and how much, false positives you get. Like you'll get really like intense tech conversations as soon as you say that you have AI and data. You can elongate it and talk about some of them high level, but then I feel like sometimes it opens more cans of worms than it needs to, which goes into then a lot of people ask about monetizing that piece as well. So I guess question of just like how much on not only just your financial model, but just data point numbers too, do you feel like should be elongated or needs to, so that you don't have to tailor every single presentation completely differently?
Yeah, good question. So I have a slide here. Doesn't go into like huge amount of detail, but I'll show you so you know what I'm gonna provide. Where's my slideshow? Yeah. So in terms of knowing or what to include in terms of your numbers, I think Leah had already spoke a bit to this, which I would also love and invite you to jump back in. So very quickly from my perspective, I often talk about, so it's important to know your numbers so that you feel confident talking about not just your future vision and the ask and how your ask fits into that future vision, but also how you got to where you are today, including all the bumpy decisions that are reflected in those numbers. So what I often talk about is something that an advisor I work with taught me, which I really appreciated, which is something he called the cocktail napkin economics. So that's something that like if you were in a busy cocktail lounge, you would be able to scribble on a cocktail napkin these kind of basic things, which are the economics of a single transaction. So that might be your price, margin, cost of goods sold. Leah spoke to other elements if you're SaaS specific. Your break-even story, so showcasing your break-even, because that shows the product market fit element or story. And that would be in like your 3 to 5 year projections. And then your accelerator story, which is the growth story. So what does that growth look, what does the projections look like? What does that growth look like? What does scalability look like and when? What are key milestones and the finances and resources that you need in order to achieve your goals? So I don't know that it's necessarily so much specific numbers that I'm going to like give you a checklist and be like, you have to include all these numbers. There's things on the slide that you might have and not say out loud. You want to have certain things in your data room in terms of financials, but in terms of the pitch itself, it's more about what story do these numbers tell around how do I make and spend money, which I think is pretty much exactly what Leah said earlier around like, how do you make and spend money? So that's a really important piece that you're wanting to answer with this question. But given Leah, your experience and our limited time, I'd like to pass it to you for a minute to just kind of give some more direct feedback on that.
Yeah, again, I think that the numbers that are going to matter the most are the ones that best reflect your strategy, right? And that really depends what kind of business you're in, what kind of business model you have, right? You might be in really, really early stages where you have no revenue yet. So what's your most important metric that you can have, or maybe customer adoption? You know, I've got these customers. We're not making a ton of money yet, but I've got these trials. Maybe I have the number of trials that I'm measuring. Maybe you're so early that all you have are some patents around your technology. Or maybe you're already, up and running and you have a strategy where you can really measure revenue. Like this is impressive to have break even and a revenue forecast and all that kind of stuff. a lot of you won't be there yet, right? In terms of that kind of revenue projection. And that's fantastic. But the key is to reflect your business. If you're in a SaaS-based software solution, you know, cost of goods sold isn't going to make a lot of sense in the world of that, right? In a SaaS world, SaaS metrics are about you know, acquisition, customer retention, ARR. There's certain SaaS metrics. If you're in a hardware, you know, you're delivering a piece of hardware, and you know, you have different business models on how you're going to, and you have channel that you have to go through and everything else. The metrics that you show are going to be different. The cost of how you're doing your manufacturing and your cost of goods sold are going to be really important. So it really depends on what that market opportunity is, where you're at in your journey, but picking metrics that best represent your progress, right? You guys have probably heard of doing a flywheel for your business. Does that sound vaguely familiar? It's just one of the business models used these days is, you know, what's your flywheel to accelerate growth? And you identify different parts of your flywheel. And if you can measure each piece of that flywheel and show progress, that can be a huge, you know, that can be all the metrics that you need to have in your pitch. So it's really knowing, you know, here's my market opportunity, here's how I'm going after that market opportunity, and here's my proof to show that I'm making progress with the strategy that I've chosen. You know, if I'm as another example, if my business completely relies on me going through channel and not going direct, then I need to show how many channel partners I've added. You know, maybe it's a geographical expansion thing. I better show my geography and show how I've expanded. So articulate your strategy, your business model, and then show proof points, metrics that really back that up. Does that make sense? I know, because it really, really depends on what strategy you've chosen. And a hardware company versus like a brand new medical solution versus a SaaS-based software app, they're going to have different metrics and different proof points to bring along.
Yeah, I think I was gonna say it makes sense, but I think it's something I'll still have to kind of pick over, because we have, you know, the typical numbers that are on this slide, but then a lot of the questions come because we also leverage billing codes. So then you have different mechanisms of payer providers that will be incorporated into building that out, and how much you can get for a code and percentages that are actually paid out. And that's, I guess, where normally a lot of those questions come from, is like if that's counted for in the revenue model, and then if we've really sorted through that. So just trying to figure out how much of that is important to actually put into the presentation for an elongated one.
And what's the most important part of your strategy in that? You know, is your expansion going to come from the number of those payers that you have involved, or is your expansion, your strategy to focus on direct new customer acquisition? What are the things that are going to prove that you're on track the most? I found, by the way, I'm just going to refer back to Carlin's very first presentation. One of the things I didn't like about her, before she changed it, one of the things I didn't like is she had that metric slide with the 3 graphs, and one of the graphs just said number of customers, and it had like a up. But on a previous slide, she had said that she had different kinds of customers she was going after. So my immediate question as an investor was, well, where's the growth coming from? Which is your customer? Which one do you care most about? Is it that small customers at the mid-size enterprise? What are you going after? What's your customer? And then show me that is where my growth is coming from. You know, maybe you started out when you had, 3 or 4 different kinds of customers because you were testing the market and you didn't know where you were going. And then you find that, wow, my repeatable solution is in these, let's take an example, a large tech company. They're my best, buyer. Well, then a key metric to track would be number of new tech customers that I've added in the last quarter over quarter trend. Here's my popping point, right? Here's my ICP, and I can show that versus my overall customer growth. Hey, I'm still getting some inbound inquiries that I'm dealing with, but here's the one I really care about. So it's like, it's being true to your strategy, which is the hardest thing. But how can I articulate, here's the money I want to go after. Here's what I've chosen as my strategy to go after that money. And here's the metrics that I can use to show that I'm making progress. So you'll probably all have different, financial metrics in your presentations.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah. What story does the numbers tell, and what's that accelerator story? Yeah. Thank you, Leah. That's really helpful. Interesting about flywheel. I didn't know about that. I'm gonna look
Yeah,
into it.
flywheel is sort of the new. It's there's so many business models, right? We've all been through, well, especially me who'd been in the industry since '90. Different business models, Jeffrey Moore and Crossing the Chasm, and your product lifecycle growth and all this stuff, right? And we've used them all over the years, but the latest kind of thinking, especially for accelerating a business quickly, is developing a flywheel, which is basically saying, it's knowing how your business is going to grow and identifying, let's say, 4 key points on that flywheel that, if I grow the number of new customers, if I do this, it's going to accelerate the growth. And then I can measure those points along my flywheel and show those as my metrics.
Cool.
It's how we measured our business within our business. Like we had a small innovation within a bigger business, and we showed that through a flywheel to say, yeah, we've got this other business going. We have 500,000 customers. That's great. But here's the ones that are accelerating our growth, and we're going to measure those separately.
Amazing. Thank you so much. So I'm going to pass it over to Katie. Again, it was an honor to be here today, and I hope to connect with you all one-on-one as well.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you so much, Melanie and Leah. Jam-packed session again, which I'm loving that we're getting down to the last couple minutes. I'm gonna do one thing, which is ask everybody to smile so I can take a picture. So I'll count down to 3. So 1, 2, 3. One sec. Perfect. It worked. Oh, wait, did it work? Just wait. My screen, it keeps cutting folks off. Okay, there we go. Yes, it worked. We're all good. And now I'm going to share my screen really quickly to go over a couple of things with all of you for come. Also, if Melanie, if any questions come up in the chat from the founders that didn't get their chance to ask, please. Oh, I didn't share the right thing. Please just address those quickly while I go over things. Let's see. Okay, let me know if you guys can see my screen. Was I sharing the right one? Do you see next steps? Perfect. Got a thumbs up. Thank you, Jane. Okay. So we have our workshop on Thursday. I'll send you the link and resources, so don't worry about that. Make sure to visit Circle. That's where you can find them, or go to our founder share folder. We are delivering the 12-minute pitch. So just a reminder that come ready with your decks and your 12-minute pitch, and to be timed, and to hear from our investors who are volunteering for that. We've got an investor list. So Melanie referenced this a couple of times, that you can book time with her. We have other advisors. Sorry, I said investor list, advisor list. We have other advisors that are there to support you. You've each been introduced to your financial and legal advisor. Building on that, we have others available. So you can go to that document, which is in your founder share folder. Also, you can just come to me directly if there's any gap that exists. Feel free to message me, and we'll work hard to find that solution for you. We are traveling to Ottawa. So for those who are not in the Ottawa region, getting ready for that travel and getting you signed up for the conference we'll be attending, and other benefits that you get for being part of Sheboot. That's all on the agenda for this week for me. On that side too, for those who are traveling, we'd like to get you booked in, and then talk about what that reimbursement for costs is, what that process is like. So I'm going to send you the document that gives a really detailed overview. And then lastly is just a reminder to fill out the feedback forms. I think I've covered it all. I'm always racing. I think I've covered it all, but any questions that come up, please do fill out the feedback form. I shared it in the chat. It's the link. It should take 2 minutes, and it means a lot. So, and I'll also be posting the recording of this session and any resources that Melanie referenced, as well as sourcing some of the really great things that were shared, like the flywheel. I'm going to look to find some resources that we can pop into Circle 2 and into the founder share folder, so that you can reference that if you'd like some of those, put some of those to work for your business. I think that's it. Oh, Cheryl, go ahead.
I'm just going to say it again. Thank you. Jane and Bronwyn have already reached out to me, but if anybody wants to join us tomorrow from 8 to 10 PST for co-working, just reach out to me on Circle or just email me. It's super casual. Just wanted to have a space where like I personally can work on stuff. So if you guys want to join us, please join.
I love it. That I do that with friends of mine. It helps me get so much more work done, even just the timing tactics and things like that. So I love that you suggested that, Cheryl, and encouraging everybody to do that too. Any other questions? I know you've probably got back-to-backs today, so I can let you all go. Thank you so much for being here. I hope you got a lot of value. And yeah, be in touch if you have anything to follow up with. I'm available. Bye, everybody.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.